Hi, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I'm not in a Joe Blog studio today. I'm actually down at the beach. If you have a look behind me there carefully, I think you can probably see the sea. And for anybody that's typing to say this is AI, it's not real, I can assure you it is. I'm not in my usual place. I'm actually on holiday. But I wanted to make this video because there's been some really interesting developments in terms of Ukraine's drone warfare against Russia. And the first one that I wanted to talk to you about is a strike on Russia's largest oil refinery. And the reason why this is monumental isn't because it's another oil refinery, because we've been talking a lot about the oil refineries being targeted by Ukraine. So that's not a major surprise. But the one that has just been hit is 1,700 miles, so 2,500 kilometers from the Ukraine border. This is the longest recorded strike of any of the drone attacks that Ukraine has been launching. And the reason why that is so monumental is, firstly, it's a big refinery. It's Russia's one of the largest ones in the whole of Russia. So it's refining around 430,000 barrels of oil per day. So that's going to be really painful from Russia's point of view, from an economic perspective, to lose that output. But also the fact that Ukraine can now strike that sort of distance, almost 2,000 miles. You start to look at the map of Russia, and basically almost anything in terms of infrastructure is now within range. And logistically, this is an absolute nightmare from Russia's point of view, because it means that they've now got to defend even more of their facilities. They can no longer just say, well, we'll just cover everything that's up to 500 miles or maybe 1,000 miles from the border. Now we're at 1,700 miles from the border. That is a huge expanse and a lot of infrastructure that Russia has to worry about. But also, in terms of the strike on that refinery, clearly from Russia's point of view, they're looking at potentially shutting down one of their biggest refineries. 430,000 barrels of oil per day is a huge amount of oil. If it loses that production, that's going to cause even more problems from Russia's point of view with regards to actually keeping the supplies going. And if you've been following the channel, you'll know that Russia has some serious issues already. It's already seeing shortages in many regions. It's introduced restrictions on how much how much gasoline and diesel you can buy. 20 litres in many cases, and some of the stations have just run completely dry. In many areas, they're now prioritising farmers and military and some of the government requirements. So there's already some major problems, and the fact that Ukraine has hit one of the biggest refineries, then that is a major problem from Russia's perspective. Now, in terms of, if you're wondering what the name of that is, let me just check. I'll just refer back to my notes here. It is the Omsk facility, OMSK. That was the one that's just been hit recently. Now, one of the other things I wanted to talk about is that Ukraine has also changed its tack, as well as targeting all of the infrastructure we've been talking about, which have been, we started off with the oil producing areas, then we went to refineries and ports and some other infrastructure. It's now targeted electricity substations, firstly in the Crimea region. Now, Crimea is the area that was previously part of Ukraine, that was annexed by Russia in 2014. Now, that war didn't really get going. That was the one where Russia sent all of its troops in and took over Crimea pretty much without any sort of retaliation from Ukraine. And it was a 2 or 3 day affair. Very few people lost their lives. It was basically what President Putin thought was going to happen when he attacked the 4 regions in February of 2022. But clearly that didn't happen. Ukraine had learned, it had prepared, it was ready, and it fought back fiercely. But since 2014, the Crimea area of Ukraine has been annexed by Russia, so it's part of Russia now. But the problem with that area is that it's a peninsula. So basically it's surrounded on 3 sides by water. It does have some land that it can deliver stuff to, Crimea, but there's primarily a bridge, the Kerch Bridge, over onto what is effectively an island. It's a peninsula, but it looks like an island when you look at it, apart from the bit at the bottom that joins onto the mainland. And so Ukraine has now targeted the electricity substations in that area. And if you're not familiar with what an electricity substation is, it's basically where you get the power from an electricity power station. It's then sent to substations, and from those substations, it's then distributed through to civilians and businesses and basically your home. So it's basically the network within Crimea. And Ukraine has now targeted all of the substations in Crimea, which has led to blackouts. They've lost electricity in Crimea. And that's a nightmare for a number of reasons from Russia's point of view. Firstly, the people in Crimea don't have any electricity, so that's obviously a concern, and that's going to cause them upset and disruption. They won't be able to watch TV or charge their devices or do anything, basically. But more importantly and more seriously, all of the businesses within the Crimea area won't have access to electricity, so basically they won't be able to keep up with their production and their facilities. And then things like the defense systems within Crimea that Russia has built, so all of its radar and things that are defending the area from the drone attacks from Ukraine, they will be impacted. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, that's not a problem, is it? Because they've got generators, so they can just use all of the generators to fire up and power everything. But the problem with the generator is that it needs fuel. So you need to get fuel, and Crimea is one of the biggest areas that's been affected by the shortages of fuel. So this is really Ukraine hitting Russia where it hurts, because by depriving the area of electricity, by cutting off all of those substations, it means there is now more dependence on electric generators, so portable generators and generating units, which require more fuel, and that's the thing that Crimea doesn't have at the moment. So this is causing wide-scale problems in the Crimea area, problems for the people, problems for the businesses, and economically, it's going to be very damaging, because if businesses can't keep trading, if they can't keep producing things, then basically you're not going to get any income, and that's going to hurt your profitability. Now, if you've been following the channel, you'll know that Crimea has been suffering anyway, because it's a tourist area historically for Russians. That's where they go for their summer vacation. They go to Crimea because it's quite a nice place to spend time. But this year, it was already suffering because of the lack of fuel in the region, because most Russians drive to Crimea. So a lot of them cancelled their trips. They didn't want to go because they were worried that they wouldn't have enough fuel to drive back or drive there once they were at their holiday destination. So a lot of the hotels lost their bookings. That meant all of the entertainment in the region, so restaurants and bars and anything where you go for a day out, all of those businesses lost their income for the season. And if you're in a holiday resort, you can't recover that, because your peak season is when you make most of your revenue and profit for the year. So if people don't turn up, you're not going to catch that up in the winter season, because nobody wants to go on holiday in the winter to somewhere where it's not particularly hot. So this is striking Crimea at the worst possible time from Russia's perspective, because it's the summer season. It's when most people would be traveling to Crimea. But when you look at the news reports and see that they don't have any fuel, they now don't have any electricity, I don't think too many Russians are going to be rushing to take their vacation in Crimea this year. So that's bad news from Russia's point of view. And again, what this shows is that it's very difficult for Russia to know what to defend, because it started off trying to defend all of the oil facilities and then all of the refineries. It then had to start defending its ports and some of its big factories. It's now having to think about things like the electricity substations, and there are thousands of those across Russia. So if Ukraine targets lots of substations, it's a nightmare from a defensive point of view, from Russia's perspective. And also, if there's an explosion at an electricity substation, it's likely to cause significant damage. And that's going to take quite a long time, and resources and money and people and equipment to repair. So lots of things for Russia to consider, at the same time as it's now having to widen the net, because Ukraine has managed to get a drone through 1,700 miles to the largest refinery. So all of these things are an absolute disaster from Russia's point of view. And just picking up on the other drone strikes that have been reported, because Ukraine has really ramped up its targeting of lots of different infrastructure over the past week or so. Zelensky has said that he's going to launch a 40-day campaign, and we're right in the middle of that now. And this is disaster from Russia's perspective. We've had reports of multiple ports within Russia being hit. So the St. Petersburg oil terminal was hit, and that handles diesel, fuel oil and petroleum products. So it's one of the largest export terminals on the Baltic. We've also had the Vostok port, which is a major Baltic port, which handles petroleum products, LNG, coal and grain. And it's important because it connects Russia's energy exports directly to international shipping. In addition to those ports that are handling petrochemicals, we're also seeing reports that the Kronstadt naval base near St. Petersburg has also been hit, and that's home to the Baltic Fleet and naval maintenance and military logistics, and the Kerch Bridge has also been targeted. So lots of different infrastructure being targeted, as well as the rail infrastructure and other oil infrastructure. So the reason I wanted to make this video, and not just to show you this fantastic view behind me, and I think if I'm going to make a few more videos, which I think I will over the next few days, I'll wander around this place a bit more. I'll take you down to the beach, maybe show you the pool, some amazing views. See if you can guess where I am. I'm somewhere in Europe. I'll give you that as a clue in this first video. So if you can have a guess where you think it might be. It's pretty warm here, nice and hot, blue skies, really good temperature, but that's fine when you've got a pool and you can relax and there's no pressure. So it's different to London, which is probably hotter in London at the moment than it is here, but the heat in London is stifling. Very few homes have air conditioning in London, so it's really unpleasant to sleep in, and it's an urban environment, so you've got lots of roads and buildings and cars. Not particularly nice. So I'm much happier here at the coast. Not many vehicles here. I can just walk around, take a stroll on the beach, all good. But I wanted to make this video really just to talk to you about the fact that Ukraine is really ramping up the pressure on Russia. Russian infrastructure is struggling. It's really under pressure and being damaged right now. And the takeaway from today's video is that the scale and the length that these drones can attack over is much wider than it was at the start of the war. When we first saw drone attacks from Ukraine, they were pretty much small drones that had some sort of explosive strapped to them, and they were being flown like a remote control car. It was all very, very basic. Today, Ukraine has developed really large drones that can fly very long distances. They're very sophisticated. They can carry a big payload of explosives, and they're also much more difficult to hit because they're traveling fast and they're small and they're being manned. So there's nobody in them, but obviously they've got a pilot who's looking at everything remotely, who can direct that to the place where it's going to cause maximum damage. So I wanted to make this video really just to update you on the fact that Ukraine has managed to get a drone attack to be successful over 1,700 miles, and that they're also hitting these electricity substations in Crimea. Now, we don't know where they're going to attack next. It's a little bit like Russia. You know, we're waiting to hear what the news is. Where have they struck next? But the bottom line from Russia's point of view is that wherever they strike, it's going to be bad news. It's going to cause more chaos. It's going to cause more economic damage. And all of this is really bad news at a time when Russia is already struggling with fuel supplies. It's just introduced a ban on jet fuel and gasoline exports, and it's likely that a diesel export ban is going to be introduced shortly. And that's a big problem because it means it's not going to be getting any money from those exports, because if you're banning the export, then clearly you're closing down one of your main sources of revenue for the whole economy. So this is a disaster from Russia's point of view. Obviously, Ukraine is coming under severe attack as well in retaliation from Russia. So there's lots of damage happening in Ukraine, and Kyiv is now under attack on a regular basis. So nobody's really winning this war in terms of it's lose-lose, whichever side you're on. But Ukraine is causing some serious problems from Russia's point of view. And at some point, Russia is going to have to take a step back and say, enough is enough. We can't carry on destroying our own economy because this war keeps going on and we keep getting more and more damage inflicted upon us. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. Hopefully you've enjoyed seeing me out looking a bit more relaxed, maybe got a bit more colour in my cheeks today. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed it. It's a bit more pleasant sitting here than it is in the Joe Blog studio. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Please hit that hype button if you haven't done that before. It's alongside the thumbs up that says hype, And what that does is it promotes this video, it gives it an extra boost with the algorithm, so it will be presented to more people when they switch their computer on, or their phone or tablet. They'll see this thumbnail and maybe they'll click on it, maybe I'll get some more views, and maybe it'll help the channel grow. So that'd be great if you could do that. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I recently started a new channel called Build and Design, where I'm talking about loads of different things from real estate and building. It's quite interesting. I think you're going to like it. So please check that out. And I will see you again on the next video.